Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who's sad because he's lost count of his kills.
Tim Longo.
I can't even remember if I've used that one yet. It's just the worst.
How many episodes are we in for this?
Like
series?
8?
10?
I think 8, maybe something,
Ridiculous.
maybe 9. It's absurd. And the worst thing is next week is Prime, and we'll be starting a new series, and you don't have to come up with one of those things for for this game. So it's the worst. Anyway, please continue on and introduce our final Republic Commando guest.
Yes, so proud to introduce and welcome Jeremie Talbot to the podcast. We have spoken about him pretty much every episode of this 8-some-odd episode series, which is the longest we've ever done for obvious reasons. And so he is a technical artist and character supervisor, and he's done lots of different things that I'm sure we'll talk about. He started his work in the character and character animation realm back in 99, as far as I could see, but he did definitely do stuff before that. As far as other stuff before that, as far as I can tell, in 2001, he started LucasArts, where he worked on various projects as a tech artist and character lead. But he also wore many other hats, which I'm excited to talk about. And then, of course, he worked on Republic Commando then too. He worked at Tippett Studio and went to Tippett Studio in 2004. Where he worked on such movies as Charlotte's Web, Spiderwick Chronicles, and Enchanted. And then on to Pixar in 2008, where he has been ever since. There he's worked on movies such as Brave, Monsters University, Finding Dory, and then most recently Onward. And there he is a character supervisor currently, but I think he's done lots of stuff at Pixar as well. So Jeremie, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Guys,
hello.
Nice to talk to you. It's been a minute.
It has. It has.
A hot minute.
It's always so fun to do these with, especially for RC, because so many of you guys we haven't talked to in a while, and so even just hearing your voice brings back memories, of all of our RC fun. So it's
all those debates about reticles.
Yep. About everything, yes. Yeah, reticles and how you're going to hold the gun and how you're going to fit the thing on the screen and be able to animate it and be able to see it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff.
So one of the ways that we like to start, which we warned you about, is kind of like, the listeners like to know how people kind of got their start, where they got their interest in the, the area that they're in, and then, how they got into the industry. So what can you kind of take us back a little bit and talk about sort of your, you can talk about where you went to school or what your first, jobs were. And then, we'll lead up to how you got to LucasArts, but how did it all begin for you?
Sure. If you listen to Dave Bogan's interview, I think it was the last one.
Mm-hmm.
My upbringing is almost a mirror image of his. I grew up, I think, probably a half an hour from where he grew up.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. And Sheridan was legendary up there in Canada. And I thought I was going to go there. And then my whole family moved to Texas when I was in the middle of high school.
Oh.
So it really changed everything. But I was really into animation. I knew I wanted to get into animation somehow. And then somewhere along that timeline, I started seeing computer graphics like Listerine commercials and like awesome. the like hand, that like computer graphics hand, I think that I saw on PBS at one point. It was actually an early Pixar thing, I came to find out, but I was really interested in that too. So I kind of took this weird detour where I knew I wanted to do art, but I wanted to do computer stuff too, and I didn't really know how to get into it because it wasn't really a thing then.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So I ended up going to art school in Baltimore, Maryland. Actually, it's called the Maryland Institute College of Art, but it's primarily it was a fine arts program only. There was not much of a computer graphics or animation program at all, but I was down in the States, so that's kind of where I went. But I was lucky enough to get an internship at Alias in Toronto, which for people who don't know back then, that is prior to Alias becoming like being purchased by Autodesk. And that is the home of Maya. So when I was an intern at Alias, I was in QA, and we were QAing Power Animator and Maya version 1. So I was deep in sort of that when I was in college. So what I was doing is I was going to college and doing kind of fine arts illustration stuff, and then every summer break and winter break I would drive up to Toronto and work there. And work in QA there and just work on basically my reel without any guidance. So it was like I wanted to do what Bogan ended up doing, but I had to figure out how to build it all from scratch kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that kind of was really prime ground for me to learn how things worked. I had some great mentors there. One guy, Jonathan French, was there. He was ex-ILM, and he worked there, and I was just like a sponge, like an 18-year-old kid who just wanted to do that. I was just at his heels constantly, and I think that's where I learned, how to figure things out so I could make pictures I wanted to make. Right.
Right. Right. So you've worked on literally every version of Maya then? From the beginning?
I think so. That makes me feel kind of ill when you say it that way. But yeah, and what's so weird about it is I was so young, like they were just trying to figure out, I remember they were trying to figure out how to get young students to learn their software because it was complex. And that was one of the reasons why I was in QA, was to kind of test the software and go, I don't understand how any of this works.
Usability testing or whatever.
Yeah, but like, how do you communicate? How do you design UX? Like for new users who are basically art people, and artists, and
you were the audience, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So cool. From there, I ended up with kind of like this ramshackle demo reel that that I actually sent to every single visual effects company I could find, and there was not internet really. Like it was like literally like there was internet. I was just scouring for addresses and I put them on VHS. In order to get them on VHS, actually, I drove my computer seatbelted next to me to the weather station.
What?
I had a digital disc recorder, and I figured out how to hook it up and like get the frames of my reel off my computer and onto a videotape. It could be, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. I know exactly what you mean, because I actually had to do something similar in 1996.
And I said, will you let me use your digital disc recorder? And they said yes, but can you do a graphic for our like our weather? So I did clouds in front of the sun and full sun and like rainy. And like, and then they use that for their weather, and then I could record my demo reel, and then I mailed it out. And only one company replied, and I got an internship there, and it was this company called Metrolight Studios, which is no longer around. But they, years before I worked there, their claim to fame was the Total Recall stuff, where he like runs the original Total Recall, where he runs through the X-ray machine and he's got like the gun.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah.
Say that. I think that might have been Wavefront instead of Maya. But
it was way before my time, and actually I shared a cube with one of the authors of the original Wavefront. His name was Con Pedersen, and he had all kinds of cool war stories. Anyway, it was like a bunch of really cool, smart people worked at that place, and I learned so much from them. And then everybody scattered to the wind as that company dissolved. Many of them are now, directing or CG souping elsewhere, or doing all kinds of different things. But that was my first. So that was the first phase, was jumping around freelance doing visual effects at different houses, meeting really incredible.
Where was Metrolight?
Oh, that Los Angeles. So my wife and I drove flew to LA and like moved there. She's a UX designer, and I'm a visual effect. I was in visual effects, and so we worked there for a few years. The work sort of dried up in visual effects. There was an actor strike and a writer strike back then. I think it was a writer strike.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
That sounds familiar. Yeah.
And then to sort of take a left turn into games, you know, at being sort of like into the computer graphic stuff, but also like that age at that time, I kind of was seeing games as sort of just the same exact thing as the other stuff I was working on. It was just, you're making characters or making effects in this weird environment, and it's going on a screen for film or it's going on a screen for games, but it felt really the same. And I was always kind of waiting for games to catch up with like what you can put in a real time, like how, especially back then, it started to get more, it felt more and more like you could author really sophisticated content. I mean, the doors have been blown off since then. Right now, it's just insane. But even back then, it was like, oh, wow, this is really cool. And so one of the guys that I worked at Metrolight with actually came up to LucasArts. His name was Jason Armstrong.
I remember Jason.
Yeah, super smart guy. I'm still really close with him now. He's working in San Francisco on Pokemon stuff now, I think.
Wow. Yeah.
But he basically went to LucasArts and said, hey, this is a really fun thing. He was a character TD there, or a technical artist at LucasArts, and so I came up and did the same thing. He was on a Full Throttle project. I ended up on Bounty Hunter, and they did not know what to do with me at first. And I didn't know what I was doing. So it was just like, build all these characters, and you can only use bones, and there can only be like however many of them. And I was like, okay. And so that's kind of where it started at LucasArts for me.
So how much? What gaming wise were you into games, or were you? I forget. Were you a gamer, or was that something that you kind of developed as you started getting into games professionally?
It was interesting. Off and on, like when I was young, I was obsessively Nintendo focused. Yeah. In college, me and my buddies played a ton of like stuff like Mario Kart, like all night college binge Mario Kart type things, like everybody did. As it got into a little bit more FPS you can play online, then I got really into the early Battlefield stuff, some of the Call of Duty stuff, and even after Lucas. Actually, what ended up happening is the primary means that I stayed in touch with my family up in Canada was video games. So my brother and I, my uncles and I would all play often, and it felt like I was actually doing something with them instead of just talking to them on the phone. So we actually end up with these shared experiences that feel like, you don't live 2,000 miles away or whatever. It's just like, oh yeah, we're going to hang out this weekend. So it was primarily FPS stuff that I was playing with them and my buddies here. And then after LucasArts, I think I still play, or before I had my son, I played quite a bit. And then when I stopped sleeping, I had to stop playing games for a little while.
Totally. Yeah. We all go through that phase, for sure. Yeah. Sorry. So I derailed you got to Bounty Hunter. I'm just curious to sort of like, before we get into LucasArts stuff, where your gaming head was at. But so you got onto Bounty Hunter, and now it's like real time with a bunch of different constraints. Can you? Yeah,
I remember.
Well, yeah, go. I don't want to mess your memory up there because I want to hear whatever story you're about to tell. But as you're going through, I think kind of tell people a little bit about what you're discovering what the role was, tech art, because it's, again, something we haven't talked and we don't talk about because Brett and I really can't that much. What is that role? But yeah, what did you remember?
Sure. Well, one thing I remembered that actually really stuck out to me was Ian Millam was the art director on that project, and basically just my boss. And he said, I know you're from film. I get it. The difference is when you're working on a movie, you're done a shot and it's done. When you're working on a game, nothing is done until it ships. And that was actually really a good way to kind of boil it down to the very essence of it, which is actually, practically speaking, what happened is I continued to break the game every other day until we finished. If you check something in that's bad, everything looks bad, and there's nothing that's sort of sequestered away from that because it's all live and you're playing with that live asset.
Yeah.
So that was a really interesting
That's a great
way
distinction.
to kind of
Yeah.
protect the game from me.
Yeah, because I mean, tech art touches everything, you know, and you can break the game. It's cool you mentioned Ian, because, you know, he's, as you probably know, maybe you're still in touch with him, he's now real-time CG soup on The Mandalorian, and he did stuff at EA, and so he's been around.
Yeah, it's amazing when you work at these places and at these moments in time where you have a team that really, like, you kind of come together and you're all solving a problem together, and it's so hard and it's so, like, I don't know, it's so tight, and then whatever circumstances happen where that team dissolves, everybody just kind of scatters, and then you can just kind of watch just everybody's kind of grow in what they do, and you get to kind of watch it. But it's always a bummer because some of these people are so fun to work with, but you kind of can never get that exact kind of team together again, you know? It's a weird thing. In production, at least, no matter what it is you're making, it's always that way. You're making a thing, the thing is done, everybody moves on.
It's a weird sort of alchemy, you know. It's just like, and you know, if you're lucky, that alchemy really leads to something great, and the process doesn't explode. So
it keeps it really fresh, because every time you start something new, it almost feels like a new company, even if you're at the same place, because it's a whole different set of people.
Yeah, and LucasArts definitely was that way, for sure. You know, over the time that I was there, and I went back a second time. And it, you know, obviously it was a different company in many ways too, but it you know, it definitely felt fresh. Yeah. Each project that you moved to. For all the reasons you said.
And speaking of sort of technical art, it's interesting because in film, it's called technical director. Generally, your title is, and I think that just comes from a different history. And in games, it's technical artist. It's sort of the same job, and then within that there's kind of character. The character side tends to be a bit of a specialty.
Right.
What I think, to ask, what, you know, like to Brett's question, what can you describe that role? I think many people in that role either came from engineering or art, and they had a real sort of bent on the other. Like they didn't really fit in the kind of silo of I'm an engineer or I'm pure artist, but they ended up in one way or the other, like, I just want to make a game, or I want to make a short film. And because you want to do that, you end up doing all the things, and you end up having to be more of the glue between the specialties than a specialty yourself, right?
Yeah.
So you end up holding together, attaching the animation to the engineering, or in the case of film, attaching animation to color and lighting, or you know what I mean? Like you kind of hold those things together and kind of have a certain amount of knowledge of all the things. You're kind of the hub in the middle of all these spokes. So that's why it's also so hard to define, I think, or understand for leadership on projects, to really understand what it is you're doing, because a lot of times it's really responding to a particular problem.
Right.
It's kind of a vague description.
Character. Go on. No,
with
go
character
ahead.
Stuff, it's like, I think it's a lot more clear. It's generally speaking, if you're in rigging, you're kind of putting together the articulation that an animator animates character with. You know, you start with a static model. The animator needs to animate that model. It needs to look a certain way when it's posed. So character TDs or technical artists tend to add the articulation to the model so that it can move around like a puppet. And actually, when I was at Tippett Studio, they actually call it the puppet department, which I thought was actually really appropriate and very clear. So that's kind of what you're doing as a character TD. But even then, you know, there's much more artistic character TDs that focus a lot more on the sculpted shapes and the look of things. when it's posed. There's technical ones that have to build the pipeline and infrastructure to make that possible. So there's just a huge wide gamut of work that goes into building any of these things.
Yeah, what I was going to say is like on big projects, especially my last few that I was on, we have now, obviously there's technical art specialists who are in different areas. It's not just you have a couple that kind of do everything. It's like now they're actually, there's so much going on and there's so much gluing that does have to happen, like you said, that there's tech art for UI, there's tech art for character, there's tech art for, for systems. There's all sorts of crazy, and it just has multiplied. And I think the reason that I think we were both excited to have you on and for Harley to talk a little bit about her past is, I think for players and our listeners, I think it is, you're right, it's totally hard to define because it is so kind of depending on the project and the product. But like, people hear about designers and they hear about artists and they hear about programmers and stuff, but like all of those are their own thing that are just discretely separate until they are put together. Like especially in video games, that you can't make a full cohesive thing unless you have somebody who can actually, like you said, glue / connect those things together. Yeah. Otherwise, it's like, an animation on someone's screen.
Yeah. It's like the parts of an engine or something like that, where you've got all these things that have got to slot together. And then, the whole thing will overheat and, melt down if you don't have some kind of lubrication that makes it all go, right? So, yeah. I mean, in some ways, that's what those technical, director / artist skills enable. Yeah.
Yeah, I like your hub and spoke is another good way to put it, because the wheel wouldn't work if you didn't have that connection point. Yeah.
And in the other thing though, to even make it a little, in the 90s or way back then, I can't even believe that I'm saying these words out loud, but it was always that the people who are working on, whether it be visual effects or games or anything, wanted to animate them, wanted to make them look really cool, and the technology is kind of in the way. And so by virtue of that fact, people had to get more technical to get it out of the way. They had to figure out how to make it work. And I think that's why a lot of, that kind of emerged as a craft. Yeah. But there wasn't no such thing as like character rigging back then. It was just like, we're animating it and we have to put a rig in it in order to animate it. And so we just rigged it. Yeah. And then some people tended to be the people that kind of were the go-tos to figure out how to make it work, where others were the go-tos to make, once it's working, make that shot really sing. Right. And I think that's kind of the difference, right? It's like that's how it kind of branched into these specialties. And then you see again, like you're saying, like it's continuing to branch, because as it gets more complex, you kind of slice these positions up into more and more discrete pieces. But I do think that there's a tendency towards that kind of siloing, that I actually think when you find somebody who is really energized to not be stuck in that silo, and I'm thinking of somebody like Nathan Martz, right? Like they're put in they're in a position, but they just want to make the thing, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of want to just let them go where they're trying to get to, so long as it fits the goals of the project, because that's when like kind of magic happens. It's sort of like aligning with whatever their interests are. Yeah. And I do feel like technical artists fall into that a lot, where they just want to make the thing and like, like help everybody just build the thing. And looking back at sort of the comments you had about Adam and in the podcast, and like thinking about what it was like working on Republic Commando, I think it wasn't because we knew what we were doing. Nobody knew what they were doing at all. It was just like, let's just try to make it as cool as we possibly can. Right.
Right. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. Yeah. And I definitely don't, I'm not bringing up the specialization because I agree with it, because I agree with you that I think that it's one of the challenges of big teams anyway, right? Sort of like being crushed under its own weight when it comes to that sort of infrastructure. On one hand, you need some of that structure because it's so big, right? But as you start expanding, and thus the specializations come in because of the structure. But also you lose, like you're saying, you lose some of that. Obviously, you lose some of that agility and just like passion for somebody just wanting to make a thing. Because at the end of the day, that's really, like you said, that's really all it is. And Nathan was a great example of that. Because then what happens is like you have all these specialists and then they don't care about the sort of full gluing experience. They're kind of only caring about, and it's not their fault, they're only caring about what they're responsible for. And sort of, you kind of like, well, that other thing is not my problem. It's somebody I've never met's problem, and so you lose that sort of connection point. And, and you also mentioned earlier the sort of the challenge with describing to management or team leadership what the value and what, because they're going to ask, what do these people do? How do we justify, a spot for them? That's happening now with technical design, which is a whole nother thing that's surfaced, that has become a critical thing because these engines are so technical on the designer's side. And you have designers who aren't capable, right? So you need a gluing person there too. But then now it's going through a whole phase of like, well, what does that person do? And you can't describe it very easily. So it's fascinating to see it happening in another sort of discipline in a way. But
and I think that kind of level of specialization is important too, right? Like it's inevitable and important. It just it is but like having those go-betweens, those people that can kind of fill the gaps and who are responsible to kind of put their arms around a problem instead of individual pieces of it, I think is a real compliment to the project. And I really remember you guys doing that on Republic Commando, where you would set up, I don't know if you remember this, but you guys set up these things you called Tiger teams, which was like, here's a problem. Like you four people
stuck. Yeah.
you four people have to work on this problem. Right. Yeah. And I think that ends up getting that agility in the large team, because you end up kind of saying, even though we're a big crew, like there's 5 people that are responsible for this one thing, and that becomes a little project that has a clear start and end.
Yep. Yeah. There's
one for the maneuvers as well, actually, now that I think about it. So
we were fooling with early agile-ish development kind of stuff. And I don't think we fully knew it. I think Darren and Chris and Brett and I probably had talked about it in the past, but we weren't technically doing agile, but the sort of scrum teams or strike teams, sometimes they're called. And when you mentioned Tiger teams, it's funny. That jogged a memory for me. I was so geeking out about doing sort of a military game. And of course, as you might have heard in Bogan's interview, he mentioned the Navy SEALs instructor we had come in. And who I think was actually a friend of Darren's. That's how we got connected with him. But I actually bought military jargon manuals for that project. I had 2 or 3 of them that I found online someplace or whatever. And I went through them, and Tiger Teams was in there. And we were trying to think of a cool military name for those teams that literally are like, take these these experts, drop them on a problem, sit them together if you can, and just like make it happen. It's like you said, it's a thing that needs to happen. And that's what the military call those teams. They call them Tiger teams. And so that's where it came from. So anyway, funny little, I just totally forgot about those manuals, but
you invented Agile and you didn't even know it.
No.
I know.
There were much smarter folks working on that at the time, but we liked some of those concepts. And I remember talking to Nathan, actually. He was very interested in that kind of development too. And I definitely carry that stuff with me, since then, for sure, that kind of mentality. But and it's, one of the other things that you and I talked about sort of just when we were texting, kind of setting this up, you mentioned one thing that I want to not gloss over is that you are actually, I think you wear more hats than you're giving yourself credit for when it comes to all the different interests and types of things that you have done and are doing. Because, and we talked about it in the early episodes, and Brett sort of alluded to it in pre-show that, the introduction or the prologue in the game was a problem that needed to be solved. And Bogan said it too, that you would animate, you would build models, you would, you weren't just the gluer, you were also, creator, which, you know, both are really creators, but you know what I mean? So can you kind of talk about, and I don't know if you're still doing that today, but can you talk about sort of like, because you were interested in that stuff too, right?
Yeah, I think it just stems from the fact that, I mean, for me, I think maybe it has to do with like coming up from an art background, really wanting to approach it from that angle, and the technology, and wanting to learn the technology to enable it. It always felt more satisfying when I wasn't just making a car for somebody else to drive. Like,
yeah.
it's really interesting when I feel like I mean, for me anyway, that I'm actually helping produce the game, and
Yeah.
or whatever, or make the movie or make the commercial, that I love participating in that as part of the team.
Yeah.
And so I think it just came from that. Like, there's just a hunger there that a lot of us had on Republic Commando, especially through the dynamic of that team, where everybody just was singularly focused on the gameplay and making it really fun, and so I think we weren't kind of put in I think it's two things. One is I was really hungry to work on that project, and two is that all of my leads, whether it was Bogan, you guys, Chris, were enabling us, our team, to do the things. So not only was there wasn't anything blocking us, there was nothing but support. And we were all hungry to kind of make it better. So I think everybody from every angle was throwing ideas around and doing as much as they could. The other thing too was having figured out a bunch of stuff that nobody else was responsible to figure out, like how to get these characters into the game and into Unreal at the time from Maya, all that kind of stuff. Like, I had a particular set of technical skills that I could use to help build those like cinematics and things like that. Like, It was easy for me to go, oh, you need like baby arms. Well, I made all the rest of the arms. I'll make baby arms, and I'll animate them so that nobody else has to animate them, because it will only take me 20 minutes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of like that thing.
I can totally remember how enthusiastic you were, like showing off that you could like you could fire the gun, quote unquote, with the baby arms, and it would like wave its arm, and the bubbles would go up and stuff. And I just remember laughing so hard, just like you were so enthusiastic about stuff like that. I mean, it was just great. I mean, it's great to be enthusiastic about it, but I love that like level of enthusiasm of like always finding ways to plus things up.
I refer to this often because it was just like, I was in my 20s, so I was just a jackass about all that stuff. But like I remember paying Tim Ramsey $1 to put raindrops on the HUD. Like I said, because we were doing all that crazy HUD splatter stuff, and I was like, look, they're walking out into the rain. If we can just put raindrops on the HUD and you can wipe them off, like, man, that'd be so cool. And I remember him saying, we could do that. And I was like, I will give you $1. and he's like, well, give me a raindrop then. And so I remember, I don't know if Greg did it or like I photoshopped it or something, but we got a bunch of raindrops, and I just like sent them to him. And the next day there were raindrops on the HUD, and it was like, that's kind of how the team was working. It wasn't, it wasn't like fill out the TPS report to get raindrops sort of like approved. It was more like, what can we throw in, and then stuff that wasn't good, we'll just delete it.
Right. Yeah. Experimentation. Right. And it ended up sort of inadvertently coming up on lots of the interviews for the series, because I think a lot of people felt that way, that there was a spirit of safe experimentation. And I think you just put it well there too. It's like, not every experiment works, and we would just take it out if it didn't.
Yeah. I mean, it was, that's the other benefit of it being live until it ships, right? You can change it fundamentally. Actually, I remember, I don't think it was Republic Commando, but there was one day I came in and all of the animation was like jiggling around, like in the weirdest way. And I thought something was broken. I was playing the game and characters' hands were just shaking ever so slightly. And I was like, what the hell happened? Because I thought maybe it was something I broke. and it turned out that it was a new version of whatever the animation compressor was. Like it was compressing all the animation
compression.
curve.
Yep. Uh-huh.
And I flipped out. And the interesting part about it, and maybe this was just because my background wasn't in making games at the time, but I was like, this is insane. Like we can't. And the engineers were like, but we need to. Like we have to shrink the footprint of the animation.
Right.
And so I rallied all the animators because I was like, look at what it looks like. You know, and it got resolved somehow, and I don't remember how, but it was just one of those.
We just fiddled with the error tolerances. I mean, that happens often. Is like with a programmer, they'll be like, well, then I talked about this with like how you'd chop things up if you had no tech artists or whatever. But like, we would just look at it and say, well, it'd be great if it was this big, and we just like turn the settings kind of randomly to be like, oh, okay, that makes them that big, and then be like, yeah, they're fine. And exactly. We'd be done. We'd be like, we're done. And you guys would be like, no, that's impossible. We can't. You can't. Look at that. It looks terrible. We had that happen actually. I think on Skyrim as well, where we like kept cranking some of the animation compression up because there was so much animation in that game for us. To fit in memory. The same.
Crank
problem,
it until they scream.
Exactly. I mean, that's really what it was. Is like, we just turn it all the way, and like, we're gonna have to do this kind of in a wide way, and you find the exceptions that you really have to dial back because they're really broken. So
yeah.
Well, and that's a great example of, I think, the importance of the whole team kind of trusting each other and being able to talk to each other, and that kind of is sort of where the sort of half technical, half art people sort of fit in the middle, because I don't know that, like, I think animation is focused on their performance, technical is focused on exactly what you just said, and there's a communication layer there that has to happen in order for you to make the best product you can, right?
Yeah.
Noticing it, also acknowledging problems and connecting the people is a big part of the job too.
Right. Yeah. The communication chain. I think it was in Greg and Paul's interview that we did, where Greg kind of said, Greg Knight said something like, he makes, from that project on, he's always made sure that he has, the tech art lead, sitting right next to him the whole project kind of thing, because he's more of, fine artist, whatever, traditional, and he's always been in games, but he knows that that's something that he needs, and he needs that translator, and he needs that person to help him as an art director or what have you. And so, it's good because to be honest, not every art director recognizes that, that is so critical. Because, everyone who works in games thinks that they're technical enough to be able to do whatever they want to do. And that's not always the case. So it's good to, know that. That was a really fun, it was really a great seating arrangement, because I remember sitting on the one side was Greg, and on the other side of me was Dave Bogan. And then right behind me was Paul Murphy modeling everything. Yeah.
And I actually remember the feeling, and I think a lot of technical artists feel this way, of being like, oh man, well, I want to make that picture, or I want to model that character. I want to do that animation. So I think that that's what was happening a lot with the technical artists, is that you just are like, you just are hungry for those opportunities. And they let us, like, and the cool thing about it was there wasn't any barriers. Like, Greg was more than happy to sort of let me, like, I remember working with him on a lot of the printed content where I would render one of our characters. I would work on making them look better so they could be rendered, and then I would render them and light them and kind of plus everything so that it could be like rendered at a higher res. And then Greg would take it into Photoshop, and we'd kind of go back and forth.
Yeah.
And that was the same with Paul, and the same with Dave for a lot of things. That kind of back and forth and sort of real collaboration, where the roles kind of bled together, and that's what felt so fun.
Yeah, that little that cube area. I mean, I remember spending so much time there because it really was sort of like a nerve center, for so many things, and just always over there all the time because you guys were, like the baby hands is a good example, and I do have the sort of a vague, kind of vivid, but also because I'm old, vague memory of like the first time you showed those off, and
it was a team meeting or something, like this is going to be the scene, and then you clicked and you were, I totally remember it. My memory is better than Tim's.
Yeah, it's just so, yeah. And then, the other asset that I wanted to talk a little bit about, and I don't know if there's any interesting stories that come from it, but the trailer thing we did. Do you remember that thing that?
Well, we did two, right?
Okay.
One of them was pre-rendered, and
yes.
I was so proud of the way that happened.
That's the one I'm talking about. That's the one. Yeah, that was sort of like almost like I don't remember. Do you remember if we did it for almost like initially it was just an internal thing, right, where we were doing it for ourselves to kind of get a mood, but it ended up being
it
released,
was for.
Right?
I don't know if it was just internal. I can't really remember, but
company
I do remember.
Maybe?
Yeah, maybe.
Well, it was released. I mean, we did end up using it, but it was an example. My memory of it was an example of something that we were trying to put together for the team and for the company to give an idea of the style and the tone of the game, almost like a Rip-O-Matic or something you'd put together to give you that. But or an animatic, right? But it was a more polished one. And then it was so good and it fit so well that we ended up releasing it as an actual trailer to the public. You can find
and that was another one of those projects or mini projects where you kind of said, hey, you three or something.
Yeah.
Or you four work on this, and I think there was all the animators touched it a little bit. Brett and Lauren and Logan and Rebecca, I think, all worked on it. But it was like Greg did a bunch of drawing. I remember Greg did a bunch of drawings,
Mm-hmm.
and then it was like, can we do this? And then when I started I basically like kind of laid it all out, and in laying it out, I was pulling all the sets
Mm-hmm.
and characters together to kind of. I remember it was sort of like kind of being influenced by the concept art with what we had. It's like, here's what we have. Okay, I can kind of do it this way.
Yeah.
And so it turned into a sort of a different thing once it was laid out, but it started to kind of work. Like instead of the big vistas and a giant battle, it was sort of like the quiet hallway, but it ended in that cave.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I remember being given a lot of latitude to lay it out, and then in laying it out, it was kind of roughly there, and then I don't think anybody else knew. I didn't know either, but nobody else knew how to render at that moment on our team, and so I just was setting up a bunch of lights and just poking render and hoping it like looked good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then so it kind of had a momentum, and then kind of more people started coming on and plussing it and making it better and better and better, and it kind of turned into what it was. But it was sort of like it felt a lot like a school project in a way, where it's just like you have 30 days, whatever you can do.
Yeah,
it's got to look cool, right?
Yeah. I remember working with Greg on the essentially like storyboardy kind of stuff too, to kind of give us a general layout. But I think the nature of the team and the thing and what you were kind of alluding to that I want to pull on a little bit is sort of what it ended up versus what it started, what the original concepts were. And I've always wanted to and tried to embrace that, right? That the process of making a thing will and the iterations that you go through with making a thing will actually morph it into what it's supposed to be. And I try not to get too stuck on, it doesn't look like the storyboards or whatever, because as long as the spirit of it is there, what it ends up being, not to sound too cheesy, but what it ended up being was, especially in real time, was what it was supposed to be. And even though you said it's pre-rendered, I think one thing to pull out for the listeners is that you guys built it in Unreal. It ended up being outputted to pre-rendered, but you built it in Unreal.
Yeah, what it was it was all of our assets. It was all of our assets repurposed, and then we made the pictures in a different way, right? but it was all the animations that we cobbled them all together from the game. So it actually had a lot of authenticity, but we were also really early in production, I think, so we didn't have a ton.
Right. Yeah.
The second one I remember was similar trailer, only it was fully scripted. Like we put it together in like, and for some of that too, I remember like doing, I think Brett mentioned this in a couple podcasts ago, but I would literally like go into the like level, I would pause the game, I would float around with my camera, and then I would like hit record and hope they did what I wanted them to do. And I would do that like 50 times until I got a shot that like felt like it looked right.
Yeah.
And we did that for like weeks, and then we put it all together, right? And that was the second trailer.
Yeah, that was the later, like more real trailer, like
yeah,
game. Yeah.
Because more things were kind of fully baked then.
Yeah. I mean, I also think that that there's a lot in what you said before about the sort of the raindrop. It would be really cool if there was a raindrop here. I can see that in that first trailer, and like, you know, it'd be cool as if like some sort of smoke or whatever came up from these vents as they're walking down this hallway or whatever. You know, just like like it would give more visual interest or just whatever, and you just finding ways to make that happen. Like, okay, well, the camera looks right, but I could use a little, whatever, something that we don't even have yet. we'll just put it, put a particle emitter there, because you kind of knew how to do all that stuff. So yeah.
Well, the interesting thing is that I totally didn't, but I was in my 20s, and so I was just like, I'll do it. And but the other interesting thing, because I was thinking back about this, is that we didn't YouTube actually wasn't being used to kind of look up how to do things yet.
Right, yeah.
And it was, I think that was a really, as I was thinking back, and it's sort of a bit of a non sequitur, but I was thinking about like how we figured out how to do stuff. There was no real content to draw from. There was just like the people next to you, and like, and if you're really stuck, you'd go ask a programmer.
You just try stuff. Yeah. I mean, Unreal had some sort of, some of their own like forums and stuff, but it was very like trial by fire kind of prop. Yeah. Well, I wanted to also take a step back and talk a little bit more about the intro, because it's such a unique thing. And because Brett brought it up as a problem solving scenario for the game, shipping the game. And we talked about baby hands, but of course, like just kind of talking about that as a sort of not a side thing, but like an unexpected, kind of an unexpected mini project that surfaced. Do you remember anything about like, because that is, baby hands are one thing, but it didn't stop there. I just want to say baby hands as many times as I can, because I still can't believe
that was what they remember, the pink hands.
I also remember you were really excited about the kids who were like, the I don't know, they were like 10-year-old clones or whatever who are there, and they're like, you kind of had storyboarded all of the parts of it out, either descriptively, like I don't know if you actually did storyboards, but you're like, okay, and then we're gonna have a section, and it's like you're gonna be able to look over, and there's gonna be another kid who looks just like you, and he's doing the same thing or whatever, and you've got this headset on, just like I guess that's in the
forgot
movie
about that.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, just the reason I bring it up is, as opposed to the trailers, it's like that was going from like different location to different location with different character, and for a lot of it, you go from one first person rig to another, and there was just a lot of like magic, smoke and mirrors happening, it felt like, because it's such a unique, and as I'm sure you have had, for those who know that you worked on the game, and I know that I have, and probably Brett has too, that intro still is brought up when someone says, oh, you worked on Republic Commando, they do mention baby hands, and they do mention like clones and stuff. Well, but I think I'm saying that in a good way, right? Because it's an unexpected thing that happened for a shooter, But yeah, if you don't remember,
it's a bunch of assets that didn't need to be built for anything else. Like we didn't need the Kaminoans or whatever. There's a lot of stuff in there that was just built because you guys were like, it would be cool if, which is great.
I think there was definitely like in terms of building Kaminoans and stuff, I think there were requirements from the story. Like, I think there was a certain amount of direction for that, but the hard part was, but we don't want to spend any memory or like
it
right?
has to fit in this much space because that's what we can install in the initial install, right? Yeah, exactly.
And I remember going, well, luckily they're clones, right? Because now if we just duplicate everything, it makes sense instead.
Yeah, right.
It won't cost any more.
Right.
But I do remember that, like, we were starting to go like just crazy with. It was like going crazy with reuse because they were clones. So you'd have one thing and you could kind of like reuse it a bunch to make it feel big. And I kind of, it's hard to recall the specifics other than you saying we really want it to feel like it was kind of an extension of the sort of whole point of the game, which is you really feel like you're in this squad and you're elite and you're one of these characters, and we want to introduce that in a way. So I think it was less about like anything special other than that's kind of what the team had been doing all along, and so it was just kind of a continuation, and it happened to be that we did it towards the end, so we had all of this sort of institutional knowledge and partnership around all of that stuff, and so it kind of just came out of a natural extension of the good team that was functioning really well. Where I think if you get to the end of a project and you have to do something like that and everybody's just frustrated and tired, like they don't have any more gas to give. And so I think the big thing for me was I feel like it came out of the fact that the team was really well functioning. And so we could ask things of each other and we could show potential in something, and that would make somebody else go the extra mile to do something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because the animators had to animate all that stuff, and like Paul modeled that character, and like we had to texture it. Like all those funny things had to happen. So building that excitement was actually what made it happen, because then everybody was stoked about it, and we would all like jump on it and pile on and make that thing really cool.
Yeah, I had until Brett had brought it up in the first episode, I had actually forgotten sort of the motivation for needing something special and why it ended up being something we did do toward the end because of the technical need and stuff. And you know, there's definitely the coolest thing, like you're saying, about that particular one, which I think is what you just said is well said, in that, you know, there's a lot of teams where the solution to the problem that Brett put in front of the team, there's a lot of times just because of you're out of gas or you're out of time or budget or whatever it is, where there would be a different solution that might be more sort of, I don't know, efficient, or something that you know was checking the box but maybe not quite as inspired, if I'm honest. And then but what ended up being the result in this case, you know, I think could only happen, like you said, with this trust that everyone had for each other and excitement to do things. And I didn't think about it. You said it well too, that it is conceptually a natural extension for what we were already doing, because it was all in first person, you know, and it kind of showed, it added to what it is to be a clone and blah, blah, blah. So it worked well, but it still felt like kind of an above and beyond solution, you know, in a cool way to a problem that happens a lot.
And the other context, it's kind of hard to remember the timing of it all, but the other piece of context that's really important to remember is I felt like the team of the Republic Commando game, like LucasArts was going through a period of a lot of change.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, our team felt like it was apart from that, like that we were like, yeah, LucasArts is doing this stuff, but we're making a first person shooter that's going to kick ass, right? Like, and so every time there was an opportunity to sort of to show that we kind of had our stuff together and we were really like well-oiled, I think everybody jumped on it because it was a contrast to the kind of like the sort of the change and the sort of nervousness that everybody had around sort of what was going on in the greater company at the time. And I actually felt like that was a thing too.
Yeah, you're right. No, you're right. Yeah, we might have described it in an earlier episode of sort of like we were kind of flying under the radar in a way and doing our own thing, in the midst of this sort of like chaos in a way that was happening.
Right. But also, I mean,
focus.
Even beyond that, I think it was in another way. It was the Republic Commando team first, then the company second. Like that we were there for each other more so than we were there for whatever else the company needed and all that stuff. I mean, that was kind of always there in the background, but we were really we were there for each other. I mean, I think it was also just a really, you had pointed out earlier, it was kind of a safe, project in that way, and that it was warm and people wanted your ideas, and they, if you said, hey, it'd be cool if, they were like, yeah, let's try it, and not, we don't have the budget or, whatever. It was a project that was willing to put things out there. So
yeah, like with so many of those, with so many games, like I felt like there was always this sort of, is it gonna be released? That kind of feeling.
Yeah.
But like with Republic Commando, it was like, there's no way they're not going to release this. Look at it, it's commandos, it's first person, it's what everybody wants. Like from Star Wars, it's what I've wanted since I was like 3. And so I think that there was that too. It was like there was just energy of like, you're on the right side of making a Star Wars thing when you're working on cool commandos that like, because that was scratching that itch that everybody had always had from Star Wars.
Yeah. Right.
So
yeah, no, that's good. That's a good point. One of the other, which maybe we've kind of, you sort of answered this maybe throughout the interview, but one of the other questions that, if you have something cool, if not, that's fine too. Like kind of like takeaways or like looking back, 15 years later, you've gone on to do wonderful things since then. Is there anything from working on the game? And this isn't necessarily like us who also worked on the game asking you this. This is sort of a question we ask anyone, even for other games that we've interviewed for. But is there anything that RC kind of sticks in your brain that you kind of think about or use in your day-to-day today, or somehow has influenced you?
I think a lot of it, like, and maybe it's just sort of where I am with what I'm doing now, but my mid-20s self wasn't paying attention to the team dynamics, right? They were just happening to me.
Yeah.
But as I'd gone through my career and have been in more supervisory positions or leading groups of people, you start to look back at the good experiences and wonder what the alchemy was. Right.
Yeah.
And as you learn more about process, you learn more about that kind of stuff from a bit more of a kind of a academic instead of accidental level. You start to realize that it took a lot of work to get there that wasn't recognized, by me when I was working on it, and makes me pay attention a lot more to that stuff, because I think that the result, like, you can work harder on something, and just because you're working harder doesn't make it better. But if you set the table in a way that brings out the best in everybody, like, you can actually work at like less hours and get way better results, because people feel creative, because when they're under stress they don't feel creative. Like, and I felt like that was, and I think I mentioned it to you when you wrote me first, it felt like it was by accident on Republic Commando, but it wasn't. It was because I was in my mid-20s and I had no idea what I was doing, and I was just noticing. I was just noticing the result of probably what was a lot of work. Anyway, that's a big one for me.
That's well said. No, great. That's a great summary. I think you just said something like, accidental versus academic or something. That's some great little sound bites in there. I love it. I just am reveling in just this, or marveling, maybe is better, in this like more adult Jeremie Talbot that I'm listening to right now. It is just so amazing and so awesome. It's just like, because you've always had the energy, you still have the energy, but it's like now you have the, the added experience. And I feel like anyone who's working for you and with you right now probably is benefiting from all of this great Talbot energy. So it's great to hear you kind of.
Much of it is motivated by fear. I do have
That's
this.
That's also the Jeremie I remember. So
there's a really funny experience that I had on Republic Commando where we're like somewhere midway through the game and like nobody has. I never talked to anybody about this at all, but like all the characters are doing their thing and the game is, people are playing through the game and animators are animating. And like, I remember like having set up a lot of this character stuff. And I remember like literally going, maybe it'll work. Like, it's not broken yet, like, because it almost felt like, when are they going to catch me? I don't know what the heck I'm doing. Like that kind of imposter thing.
Yeah, totally.
But I still running.
I honestly I feel like that on almost every project I've ever worked on, because there's always some weird stuff where you're like, I don't know. I hope this works. I hope this doesn't break the engine, or I hope this renders, or
no, I agree. No, and I'm not surprised to hear you say that. I say that. I still feel that way on everything I work on. So it's like, I totally get it. Totally.
I think if you don't, you're not pushing hard enough, honestly, that you've let yourself become a little too comfortable, right? You're just doing the same thing,
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. To your point about like the alchemy of it and stuff, and looking back and appreciating something that you couldn't appreciate at the time or didn't really even think about appreciating. We talked a little bit about last episode when Brett and I awkwardly interviewed each other for this darn series. We talked about Darren Stinnett some, and I don't remember how much you interacted with him, or what you were probably focusing on Chris mainly. But the reason I bring it up is, he ended up being a mentor for both of us in various ways, for Brett and I. And the thing about him, because he was sort of so veteran by the time he was working with us on RC, and we had worked with him on other projects, but he was orchestrating, he and eventually Chris too, but he specifically would think about this stuff, and think about the dynamics of things. And I'm not trying to say that, it's all because of him that he set it all up perfectly, but I'm just saying, like, you can see someone who was late in their career on a project like that. And most of us were sort of still either early or mid in our career, not appreciating what we had. But, I'm sure there was some of that orchestration happening that we as leads now would like to think we're trying to do, when we build a team. So it's a really good takeaway, and a point that we hadn't really talked too much about. So thank you.
And I think it's like, it's less, I think, drawn upon in, I can't speak for games now. I've been in sort of feature film for a long time, but I think that kind of, I don't know where it is in different industries, but I think really taking a step back and thinking about the team composition is when you do it, it really pays off, I guess, is the end of a long-winded thought that went nowhere.
No, it isn't at all. And I think you're right. I mean, I guess when you really boil it down, it's like the team makeup is really the key, and the point in a lot of ways. And LucasArts was at an era at that time, which we also talked a little bit about, where, it's a medium-sized company at that time, where multiple projects were going, and sometimes tricky to get the way that projects were staffed could be tricky, because, this project needed this, and this project, and in fact, it ended up impacting Brett, as he told the story last episode. And so, the needs of the company versus like what's right from a team makeup perspective didn't always happen, and I think that's something that, again, I'm not trying to say it was that put all the credit on Darren, because it was not necessarily that, but, Darren was somebody who would fight for a certain thing, that he thought might work out better. So,
but that's what's also so interesting too, right? Because I actually, I remember I heard you guys talking about like whether to go, like there was an anecdote that you said about people deciding whether to go to management. I think you were, Tim, like what management is versus kind of purely contributing on an individual contributor level and making that choice and realizing that it's a real job, right? It's like when you sometimes when you're in that role and you're trying to, you kind of feel guilty for thinking about the process because you could be doing something else that is like tangible for the game,
right?
Or for whatever project you're working on.
And
I think that when you don't and you can really just focus on that, it pays off so much more, right? But also when you have those limitations, I think that's what gives opportunity to people that you wouldn't otherwise get. Like I bet you, I don't know how it shook out that I was on Republic Commando, to be honest, because I was pretty new. But I bet you it was because somebody else wasn't available, because nobody really knew me yet, right? And
I bet Nathan spoke up for you.
But I mean, maybe. But I guess what I'm saying, and maybe it's factually incorrect, but like that was a real. Now you give somebody an opportunity, and that gives them that first burst of like energy to be on a project and go,
sure.
Which you don't see if you're looking to fill the container with people who have done it before, right?
Right.
Like, and I think that sort of fits really well.
That's a good point, because I think at that point you're looking at the container.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Because
and it kind of fits a lot with that.
Yeah, it's the
artist?
team. Yeah, it's the team that makes the game. It sounds stupid to say that because it's so obvious, but I don't think that's like ultimately. It's like the fact that the way we spend our hours is the way we spend our days, right? It's like obviously, but people don't think about things that way, right? I mean, it's like if you literally sit down and spend your time doing this thing today, that's how you spent your day, and that's how you spent your life, right? It's the same thing with making a game. Like the team makes the game, like they actually do the thing, and it you want the people in there to feel empowered and safe to make that thing the best they can.
Yeah, and the fact that like, wow, like I got along really well with Adam and Nathan, like that in and of itself brings out the best in people, right? Or like I'm still really close friends with Brett Schultz and Lauren and like we still talk and hang out and stuff. So well, not Lauren, he jumps out of planes now, but
we know
in Utah, but yeah, that helps bring out the best in people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the working relationships and the personality, gelling and stuff. Yeah, and that's another consideration for team creation, for sure. Right? Is what that if you can try to predict sort of how people will work together. But yeah, there's the unspoken side of that and the unplanned side of it, of the alchemy, that you really can't control. Sometimes it is just the way the universe kind of played things out. Mm-hmm. But to your point about opportunity, I definitely fundamentally believe, and I've always tried to do this on teams that I've run, is you want a good, healthy mixture of seniority or what have you, experience, because you do want to give opportunities to people who are kind of up and coming, because they will relish that, and they will also be supercharged by it, and if you just have a bunch of old grumpy people that have been around forever, then that I haven't found that it makes a good kind of makeup for the whole team, at least. Well, Jeremie, you want to be sensitive of your time. And this has been a wonderful, wonderful way to conclude this epic series. Literally the glue that glued Republic Commando together and did many other things. So it's perfect. And your wisdom these days, though you're probably smiling and laughing inside when I say that, I do mean it. It's been just a delight to talk to you in this sort of like veteran Jeremie way. And I just,
it's weird to talk about a project that spans everybody's entire careers ago. Like 15 years was not entire careers, but it's a long time.
yeah. We've all gone and done so many different things and other things. And yeah, it is cool. And I think it's just for us doing this podcast because, it's focused on older games, right? And we've had a lot of great interviews for those games we've played, but it's been we've been very lucky to do this series because we worked on the game too. So it's sort of like an added special, selfish trip down memory lane in a way too. So
yeah, it's so fun to listen to the other interviews and hear those voices. Like I kind of fell out of touch with Greg and Paul, and like listening to them talk, I was like, oh man, it felt like I was like the Greg that I remember and the Paul that I remember, like kind of negotiating with about different things. It's so cool. And I just bumped into David Bogan because I moved a block away from him by accident. So we live really close to each other now.
Yeah, he told us that. That's so funny.
Yeah.
No, in fact, I think that's how I got connected to you to get you on is Dave. He was like, So
we lived 20 minutes from each other when we were kids, and now we live a block from each other.
The world.
That's weird.
That is weird. Thank you for...
Well, I guess the two of you will end up in the same nursing home. So, get that to look forward to based on trends. But yeah, Jeremie, thanks so much, man.
Thanks.
This has been a great hour. And it's been wonderful to spend a little time in your company again.
Yeah, nice to reconnect, guys. Thank you.
Welcome back from the break. It's been, I think I said off air, like 11 years and 8 months or something like that since I last saw Jeremie, but it felt like yesterday.
Yeah, he's definitely a leveled up Jeremie. As I said, I think
that's a good way to put it.
We're talking to him, he's the same old Jeremie in in every good way that is, but also better now. So it's fun to see because he admitted himself that he was in early in his career where he was wide-eyed and ready to do anything, and it was kind of fun to see there's still that energy there, but then also this like veteran, hardened.
And having learned something about that, like, and being able to apply that to his own work now, right, as a more senior person himself, right, and having people under him who are probably like that, and also, setting up the environment to be the right environment, and so good.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was good. I'm glad we got him on. It was obviously that's our last one. So, yes. But it was a touch and go to get him on there for a little while. But I think it's very appropriate that was our last one.
Yeah. A fitting conclusion for sure. Yes. If we're only going to do it once, we might as well make it just insane.
Yeah, I mean, we have one letter where the person says that they've enjoyed the interviews. I was worried that maybe we went too far with them, but I don't think that's the case. But
well, that's a good segue because I actually have a review.
Oh, good. Okay,
so
1
we'll
star.
Go straight into feedback. Now, I don't actually know. I didn't go and look for what the stars were, but because I just see the text. So I don't actually go up to iTunes.
Point.
I think I probably can by just following a link. But yeah, this person went up to iTunes and said this was from the one and only person. If that is your real name. Siblings are probably not happy with that name, but what are you going to do? The subject of it is, I really like it. And the body of it is, it's good, just SWRC has gone on forever. Still love it. Dope. I thought that was really funny.
There we go.
Yeah.
Proof.
But so now here we are. We're at the end. We're good. No more. You don't have to have any more. But it's been it's been a journey.
Our selfish trip down memory lane of a game that we worked on. Which, I was a little tentative when Brett originally suggested it. But I think it ended up being, it was definitely fun for me. And I think it ended up being just, good to talk to everybody. And in a selfish way, I think maybe it ends up sort of being this sort of weird time capsule for that, because, no one else will ever do something like that for that game. So, we are using our forum for maybe a little bit of selfishness there, but I think it was fun to actually have like a swan song for
the game,
thinking about that thing. Because
if we're still doing this in another 15 years, we get to do it again.
Yeah, that's true.
Just interview everybody else we didn't talk to.
Yeah, right.
We had some that we had one, I think, that we had planned that didn't come off.
Yes,
because of demands on that person's time, but so maybe in the future talk
That's
to
true.
that person.
That's true. We can do another anniversary episode. Callback.
Oh my God, these guys! It's like every 5 years they lose their minds and they spend all this time on one game.
Yeah.
No, but it was great to talk to everybody. I agree, and so I hope that.
But point taken.
Yeah, point taken from one and only person.
Thanks to your review, we are finishing the RC.
That's right.
Now
that we have that review, that's it. We had Jeremie in the pipeline, and we said, oh, you know what? We have this one review. We're gonna have to hold off and read it when we're done. But no, thank you anyway for writing in. He did in fact send a 5-star review, so I appreciate it.
Oh, well, that's
one
nice.
And only person. So yes,
that's very kind of him to give us constructive criticism, but still a good review.
Yeah, appreciate it.
But please keep that coming,
you out there, one and only person. Maybe not as much as your parents, but definitely appreciate you a lot. You have the first email. We have a couple emails. These are sent, of course, to devgameclub@gmail.com.
Yes, subject is loved it - one of my favorite episodes. From Luke Theriot is what you think?
I said yes. I think probably Theriot.
Theriot, yep. Thank you to you both for the last episode. Far from being weird, it ended up being, he's talking about, he's talking about the one where we interviewed each other. Yes. It ended up being one of my favorite interview episodes the two of you have done for the podcast, even following, as it did, a series of similarly excellent interviews. I have to admit, I started the episode off somewhat offended on behalf of your conspicuously unnamed guests, but had a big goofy grin on my face as soon as I heard Mortimer and the riddles of the medallion. It was also fun listening to both of you seemingly discover new stories about RC's development process from each other. Just goes to show how much we can stand to learn, even from squad mates, quote unquote, we've known for years. Thanks again. And as always, looking forward to the next episode. P.S. follow-up email. This was in a separate email, you're saying?
Yeah, he had a separate email, but I put it in there just to note. Oh, yeah, he sent us 2 emails.
Got it, yeah.
I just merged them together.
So P.S., in your last episode, Tim mentioned a graphics ? Engine called Leia being renamed to Marcus, and you gave a knowing chuckle. I did some Googling, and as far as I can tell, the only reference to those 2 names in relation to LucasArts on the whole internet is your very own show notes. Of course, you're welcome to keep your secrets if so inclined. I'm just curious what that's all about. So Leia was, post Dark Forces, Dark Forces Success, and as you know, Dark Forces 2 / Jedi Knight was the follow-up, and
right.
Ray Gresco and Rob Hubner, with some Justin Chin thrown in there as well, sort of like the project leads, or for Jedi Knight. They created a new engine that they called Leia, which was a new 3D.
I think the engine was the Sith engine.
Okay, maybe that was the editor. Leia was the editor.
Leia was, I believe, the editor. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not. Yeah. So he actually asked what I was referring to, whether that was a graphics engine or not. But as level designers, we referred to it as Leia.
Yeah. Well, that's what you worked in all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So Leia was essentially the tool set that we used, and it stood for something level editor. Something,
insane, art.
People being funny with naming things. And then when that same engine and editor migrated to the Indiana Jones project, which I ended up working on as well, Infernal Machine, they renamed the editor because they branched it off and did a bunch of different things to it, because obviously it wasn't being used for a first-person shooter anymore. They branched it off and renamed it Marcus, based on the character in that canon. So yeah, that's what that was all about. Don't mind talking about it. Those are long gone.
They have very long gone.
And I'm not surprised you couldn't find anything on it, because it's pretty inside baseball stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the reasons why I chuckled at that was, first of all, that of course they renamed it, but also like just remembering the internal naming battles. So prior to like that time of editors and tools and things like that, what I remember most is that they were mostly named for bodily fluids and other disgusting things. So of course scum, for the script creation utility for Maniac Mansion, but also to support that, I believe, was sputum, and bile were all tools that had been written for that. And I feel like this was an era where LucasArts, when we started, was trying to clean up that sort of thing so that nobody would accidentally say to the press, "Oh yeah, I just spewed out a sputum to get some bile or whatever," in some interview.
Yeah, that was the old school LucasArts.
Yeah, that was
before our time.
That was like the Ron Gilberts and Tim Schafers of the world. Yeah, naming the tools. Had named them all kinds of.
There was the Rebel Assault engine, which was named Insane? No,
Insane was a streaming engine. Yeah, the stream video engine, and it was also used in Throttle.
And it was used in Mortimer.
Oh, and it was used in Mortimer.
Yeah.
You don't listen to the episodes. You don't know that your outro music for your interview was from Mortimer.
Yeah, I don't. And I never will now, ever again. They used... Yeah, I mean, Mortimer is essentially Rebel Assault, which is funny to say, with some trivia.
Right. It's basically the same game.
Yeah. I mean, gameplay-wise, it is.
Yep.
Yeah. Funny. Well, that was another trip down memory lane. Now we're definitely done.
Well, I do have another email.
Ah, darn it.
On a similar topic. So it's, just kind of pulling that out a little bit from Ben Zog. Ben from Iowa.
It's from Ben, so that's okay.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, 2 special guests. It's been a while since I've had something to write in about. You said at the end of 2 special guests that you hoped it wasn't too self-indulgent. I found it fascinating. You guys haven't done a deep dive into each other's backgrounds like that before. We had drops and drips along the way, so it was nice to get this episode. What we haven't gotten in a little while is an update on how far Brett is in the Kingdom Hearts franchise. Have you abandoned the gummy ship, or are you still fighting off the Heartless and Nobodies? Thanks, Ben from Iowa. That's...
I had the same question.
That's not a bad tribute. Segue to our next game as well, which is not a Kingdom Hearts game, but is also from.
Oh, you just got people's hopes up.
Yeah, no more. Yeah, they're like, oh my god,
we're gonna do Kingdom Hearts 2.
No,
surprise!
No, we're not. That's not gonna happen.
No,
you say that, it comes in, somebody's gonna clip it. It's gonna go out on Twitter. I have actually. I started Dream Drop Distance like last year and picked it up. Played a little bit and never picked it up again. So that's where it ended? ? I don't know. We'll see. I may go back to it at some point this year. I've got some other games taking up most of my time. I stream a bit, but I'm also I'm not playing a ton. The only time I ever play games is when I'm on stream lately. I have not. I occasionally dabble a little bit in Animal Crossing in the morning if I'm feeling like it, but not even that very much, because I have been having some like you had that weird eye issue.
Oh, shoot!
I've actually started to have that happening to me lately as well, where too much screen time is. Yeah. I've actually had to cut some streams short lately because it's just I had a thing a few days ago where I sat down. I guess I sat down at a screen, and then I had like an after image on my retina, but had never had something that caused it. It just appeared, and was there for like half an hour. Well, so that was fun. Yeah.
You do not want to go into a helicopter.
I do not want to go. Nobody would fly me in a helicopter. I live like less than a mile from a hospital.
Oh, okay, good.
It would not be necessary to lift me anywhere.
You don't want to ride your bike.
I don't want to have to go there. Yeah, I do not want to have to go to the hospital. So yeah, no, I don't. It's a thing that's happened to me recently that I've been noticing towards the end of the day. It's eye strain. I'm sure. We're indoors all the time sheltered. On screens.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's,
yep.
Yeah. I had played for like 45 minutes last night and I was like, oh, actually it turns out I'm done for the day. Sorry. Cause I can kind of feel it coming on now.
Yeah. Right.
Like I'm sure you did. So.
Yep. And yep. That's a fun story, I think I told you at some point, but yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I felt it. So Dream Drop Extravaganza, that is what?
Dream Drop Distance, yep.
Okay. How close are you to
I believe it's the last thing. I already played 2.
Oh, okay. I thought you were still playing like the 90 games
3.
between 1 and 2.
There's like 2 games between 1 and 2, I believe.
I'm just you know what I'm doing.
Yeah, I know.
So you think you're almost a 3?
I think after Dream Drop Distance, I think is 3.
Yeah,
I mean, there's like some mobile thing, but I'm not gonna play that.
I guess I'm mainly asking in that collection, that full collection you bought.
Yeah, in that full collection, I think it's the last actual game.
Oh, you're so close. Come on.
I know, but so close is like 50 hours,
But you didn't like Dream Drop. That's why you put it down.
I don't remember what happened because it's been a minute. I don't remember what I picked up to play that I wanted to play more of, and was and it might have been just that I was streaming more or something like that, and I just didn't have the time. I don't really remember. Last year was a weird year, so I can't actually tell you. It might have actually been just coming out to Seattle as well.
Yeah, right.
And because I didn't bring my PS4 out,
right.
So it might have been just that I started it and was like, oh, you know what, I shouldn't get into this because I'm not going to finish it before I go, and then just never started it again. So who knows? Maybe someday. It is still installed, however, so I haven't deleted I haven't wiped it off the hard drive yet of the PS4. So,
well. We'll just have to be on that cliffhanger for who knows how long.
As long as it takes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, if you have no objection, I'd like to move on to our next game.
No, I do not.
And you're the only one who would see what I did there. It's time for us to move on to a new series. We actually had a suggestion of a genre we hadn't played yet a few weeks back. And it was one that, one of the reasons why we've stayed away from it is that neither of us really knows anything about them. So it was like a blind spot, really. And so we are actually going to play Phoenix Wright, Ace Attorney, which is sort of a visual novel, I gather. The other one that I was more familiar with, and literally these are probably the 2 of these that I know the names of, except for one that I played for the GDC, the Indie Games Summit, Indie Games, whatever, IGF. I think I had played one for that one year and was like, I don't get this at all. The other one was Danganronpa, which is the high school murder simulator visual novel that I do actually have and want to play at some point. So I don't know. Maybe I'll be streaming that at some point.
There's also that series that I don't remember what is it 99999?
Yeah, 999. Yes, nine doors, nine. I don't know. It's nine something.
And there's
rooms.
A series, right? There's like 3 of those, I think, that are all.
Yeah, I played a little bit. I think Hotel Dusk might be in that as well. And then
I did play that. I didn't finish it, but I did play that. Okay,
yeah, I didn't finish that either.
That's okay.
That has like puzzles, but it's sort of visual novelty. And I think it's Ghost something, Ghost Trip, Ghost something was released on iOS a couple of years back. I think
clearly this is not one of our.
We're going to be reading about this before next time. Ghost Trick, I think is
Ghost. Yeah. I've heard of all these, and I did. And I know
999 is a well-known one. Yeah. But I haven't really played them very much. Like even Hotel Dusk, I didn't play a ton of. I really like the look of it, but I didn't play much of it. Though I still have it somewhere. So
fascinating game. Now that I think back, I probably played about 4 hours or so. But yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, it sounds about the same to me. Yeah, same for me. I probably should go back and play some more of that. I did. Well, not now. At some point. At some point when my brain is better, I'll look at it again. But yeah, we're gonna play both the sort of initial episode, which I think is just a short prologue, and then the first major case. So that is what we will be playing for next time. I think this will probably be a 3-week series, I'm guessing. Huh?
No. I mean, there were 3 other cases after that one. But
that's right. It might be a 4-week series. We'll have to feel that out.
We'll see how
long they take.
Yeah, see how quickly it goes.
And I had some question about whether that 4th one is added on or not, or if there's a 5th one that's added on. I'll have to actually look at the Switch port, which is what we'll be playing. It was recently re-released as the trilogy, the first trilogy of Ace Attorney games. So that's available on Switch. We will not be playing it on, I believe, the DS is where those originally came out, because tracking that down at this point would be difficult at best. So we will be playing the Switch version. I know there's probably some improvements and things like that there. I don't think that will really change too much about the game and the form. I think there'll probably be just some minor kind of quality of life type stuff. So I think that's good and appropriate for us in particular. So
yeah,
having not really played these. But yeah, I look forward to it because it is one of those series that I had always been like, oh, I should totally, check that out, at some point.
Yeah, I've been intrigued. I mean, I'm excited to see what it's all about.
Yeah, when the new trilogy or the trilogy remaster / re-release or whatever they want to call it came out, there was some chatter about it. I know at Kotaku Split Screen, whose hosts are now over at a new podcast called Triple Click on the Max Fun Network. Jason Schreier there really loved the series and was really happy to be playing it again and talked about it on several episodes. So I remember thinking, oh yeah, that was a game I was curious about back in the day when it was originally out. I never got around to it, so it's a good time. So thank you for the recommendation. You know who you are. We do appreciate recommendations. We just don't always read them on the air just because we don't want to implicitly promise. But we do keep a list, and I separate out the emails so I can review them from time to time. So keep them coming.
I feel like this genre is also heavy in the indie space. Maybe for production reasons, it makes good sense. But I feel like a lot of the ones I've heard are
there's not a high technical
and
high technical bar to entry. It's very writing and art focused, right? And so costs are relatively low, like you said, production reasons. And there is a good engine that people use,
right, to
drive them. Authoring tools, because the form is pretty established and similar. You can do one. I mean, there are engines out there for lots of different types of games, but if you want to do more than the thing kind of knows how to do, you're kind of stuck. But that's basically what you're doing here is choices and choice points and things like that. And yeah, super interesting. And yeah, you're right. In fact, the one that I played, as you've mentioned, was that I mentioned was in the IGF.
Yeah, right.
Was an indie, a very high art quality. And I've actually heard that game mentioned by somebody else as actually a pretty good one. I just didn't know it. I was just lost. Like, I don't understand that. Like, I don't know. Things would happen, and I'd be like, I don't know what I was supposed to do about that, but I know we'll talk about that.
It seems
what
like
the
a
play
good
is.
thing to delve into.
So that will be us. Thanks so much for joining us on this long Republic Commando-a-thon. It has been it's been pretty crazy.
From commandos to courtrooms. That's what I like to say.
Sure, yeah. He says that all the time. Couldn't even tell you how many times he's... Anyway, thank you for your reviews and the email sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com and on Twitter at devgameclub, where you can also find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
And you can find him also on the gram from time to time. I've been streaming at twitch.tv/Brett Duville Hollow Knight. And on the weekends, I will be streaming what we're playing for the cast, which will be Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton and commissioned by friend of the cast, Aaron Evers. Let's all wave a fond farewell to Republic Commando this week. And good night.
Good night.